Hello, and welcome back to the Super Palooza. We are going to start getting into the animated and other types of movies that have become way more prolific in the last 15 plus years. We are starting to get into the era of superhero. Glut's a bad word, but it's close to the one I want. The first one that we're talking about here was in 2006. The first couple were in 2006, and that's only 2 years before Iron Man, which kicked off the whole superheroes are a staple of the movie world and totally unshakable. So that's why, even though we've covered, technically Smallville ended in 2011, so we covered 70 years of stuff already, and this is just in the last 17. So yeah, there's a reason for that. We'll just put it that way. Starting off with Superman Brainiac Attacks, which I did not realize existed before I started this. This is an offshoot movie of Superman the Animated Series, even though it's not canon to that series. It's the same animation and many of the same voice actors, but oh God. So they have Tim Daly as Superman. They have Dana Delaney as Lois Lane. They have this, I think, the same Brainiac. But for whatever reason, they didn't get Clancy Brown back. And instead you have Powers Booth. I mean, Powers Booth. That's a great opportunity. What great cast. I loved him in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, but guys, the writing in this is fiery, stinky trash. Like, just to use Lex as an example, they make him into a mockery. They actually play him for comedy. And just there's so much superfluous dialoguing and monologuing. You know, there's a scene where Superman comes out of the shadows and he says, "No, Lois, it's me, Superman." And he says Superman even though he's wearing this. He's wearing this. And just kind of, monologuing into the ether, and it's just not natural at all. God, it's weird. It's weird because it has a number of similarities with great animated features. Like, he's thinking about revealing his secret identity to Lois. There's incorporation of Fortress technology showing his Jor-El side. But the problem is they don't do any of this well. So, the story is Brainiac comes after Superman. Weird, right? Brainiac attacks. When he does, he uses kryptonite, and it actually infects Lois with kryptonite poisoning. So, Superman needs to get a cure from the Phantom Zone. So, yeah, that's it. That's the whole thing. He gets the cure and then loses it, but because he uses it on himself first, because he did get infected by the kryptonite somewhat, it's able to come out through his tears when he cries, and then it falls on Lois, and she's cured. Yeah, they did that thing. They went full Pokemon first movie with this, but nowhere near as nostalgically effective. God. and so yeah, there's this secret identity thing. So she's on her deathbed, right? And he regrets never telling her his true feelings, like, that kind of clarity that you get when you're about to lose somebody. But then once he gets her back, he doesn't reveal it, and for her safety, he decides to quit the Daily Planet. And then he sees her put herself in danger when he's not there, and he's like, "But what? Lois risks her life? Oh, maybe I shouldn't quit." There's no logic to any of it. It's so bad. There's something about a creative team having perspective available from the past, because look at how much stuff has come before, and they still screw up this bad, especially if they did good work before, and they did. they did. That I can't give them any leniency. I can give them no quarter. Like, quaint or silly I can do, but this is just incompetence, because it's clearly falling so far from what they expected from it. Though that is assuming that because you remember, like, these direct to DVD, these offshoots and like individual projects, there used to be so much, like, think of Disney sequels. There used to be so much less put into them, so much less expected of them. And this was probably one of those, because it was, not quite one of the movies that we're going to talk about where it's just, it's one of the animated universe. It's a bit of a black sheep in that way. But I don't care. This is like, I'm not doing order here, like within tiers, but I think when put all together, it and Superman 4 are like tied for worst property ever. Superman Returns. Now, this is such a mixed bag. I imagine that a lot of people are like, this is, of the live action movies, this is a bit of a black sheep. And it's like, it's boring, it's not very good, but it is more complicated than that. They call it an homage sequel to Superman 1 and 2. So in making this, they're kind of erasing 3 and 4 and just saying this is coming off of it, but it's also kind of a remake as well. It is trying to be a bunch of different things. So Brandon Routh plays Superman, and I kind of understand why he didn't catch on. There is something about him that I never quite bought. But he has his acting job. Like, what is he doing? He has to pull off a role that's both a reboot and a sequel when he's younger, very clearly younger than Christopher Reeve was in Superman 2. And Christopher Reeve was the most iconic Superman of all time, and he has to kind of embody him and kick off like a whole new thing. I do not envy him that at all. And Kate Bosworth, who plays Lois Lane, is kind of in a similar situation. Like they wanted new blood for a franchise, but nothing, very little about this movie helps them get off the ground. And it's hard to buy her as a Lois Lane and him as a Clark Kent farther down the line in life from Margot Kidder. They really tried to have their cake and eat it too, right? So what's the setup here? So Superman has spent 5 years away from Earth because he went to Krypton's rubble because he had to see it for himself, I think, and there might have also been another reason, but it's kind of escaping me. And the world moves on, that's a great premise, right? Lois writes this whole article why the world doesn't need Superman. She remarries. She marries James Marsden, her pretty boy new husband. That's the actor's name, obviously. And he's Perry's son. His name's Richard. Richard is perfect name for a pretty boy new husband. And yeah, that part I like. I like that whole approach because that type of meditation on Earth, like the Earth Superman relationship, had been unprecedented at that point. Like the idea of Superman coming back to a world that has moved on, especially a Daily Planet family that has moved on, is a heart-rending idea. The only issue is I'm not sure if I buy it. Because there's at the beginning, he like kind of reintroduces himself to the world because a plane that Lois is on is falling and it's going to hit a baseball stadium, and he saves that situation. And like everyone, I mean, granted, they all just got saved, so they are all pretty happy to see him, but it's not exactly the best introduction to the populace in regards to Superman when you want us to believe that he doesn't really fit in anymore, because obviously he does. And maybe that's the point, though, right? Because maybe the point is that Lois is wrong and she was really just writing it out of some sort of a petty sort of reaction to her own pain of losing him. So that's entirely possible. Because even he is like, so you are saying they don't need me, but I literally hear them calling for, they don't need a savior, but I hear them calling for a savior every day. Like, again, that they do that with Superman hearing everything. They have a thing of him going up into space and he hears the whole world. That's a really important aspect of Superman, where he has that sort of connection with Earth. And I think that sequence comes after the replay of Jor-El's speech, where they literally just reuse Marlon Brando's lines. It's kind of funny. And he says, you will live among them, but you will not be one of them. And there is this, and they complement that visually with him being in space and him being able to attend to everything that happens on the planet, but also being separate from it. It's a really great dichotomy that I think works very well. So that's kind of the setup. The plot is that Luthor wants to create his own country. Luthor is played by Kevin Spacey, who does an uncanny Hackman impression. And like I think I've already said, I'm not a huge Gene Hackman fan, but Spacey gets massive points for that alone. Like I think it was incredible, absolutely incredible. So Luthor creates the landmass, and Superman goes to stop him, but like surprise, surprise, it's like made almost entirely of kryptonite. So Superman goes to stop him, he's immediately helpless, and his goons beat him up. Which, that seems like pretty standard fare. But none of these properties had ever leaned so much into the brutality of going after Superman like that. Like they stick his head in a puddle and start to like waterboard him, and they just kick him around, hold him up, and just like wail on him, and it gets to the point where it's like uncomfortable, but in a good way, I guess, where it's just like, wow, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is something that I want the story to fix. And then they stab a shank in him and then break it off and then just push him off the. It's really like, it's an oddly godfathery, execution type of thing, and I thought it worked really well, because that type of darkness and brutality is fine, if it's something that Superman is intended to overcome, right? And I don't think live action has done something like that since. Not even Man of Steel. Man of Steel was bombastic and gritty in a way, but it didn't reach those levels, not at all. And then we've got, and so he gets picked up by Lois and Richard, and everything works out, but it comes with the kind of infamous scene of him lifting the whole continent of kryptonite and like throwing it into space, I think, and that is overkill. I do not approve of that at all. Superman can't hover just above the atmosphere, drink in sunlight for 5 freaking seconds, then go back and pick that up. Maybe if he went into the sun and spent a week in there, maybe he could do that. But as a feat standing by itself, it's definitely worse than flying around the world and turning back time. That definitely beats it. There's a really underrated, especially in that listening scene, there's a really underrated score from John Ottman that I would recommend checking out. I would play it, but that seems like a really direct use of the property, so I'll just recommend checking that out. And then there's kind of a exploration living through the Jor-El's speech, which is, you will be different. Sometimes you'll feel like an outcast, but you'll never be alone. You will make my strength your own. You will see my life through your eyes, as your life will be seen through mine. The son becomes the father, and the father becomes the son, which is, most of that is taken verbatim from OG Marlon Brando. And that's amazing. But though I'm trying really hard and cannot see in what way a father becomes a son. It's like is it like transference of knowledge going from father to son? It's potentially religious in nature, which it doesn't resonate with me personally. If you guys can think of something that might mean, because Superman basically recites it to his own son, who was supposed to be Richard White's son but wasn't, and he develops powers, and that's kind of a whole thing. If I'm missing something, let me know, because I really want that to work. Yeah, there is greatness in this movie, but it's like some of the stuff I mentioned, it doesn't have all the elements and never really decided on what it wanted to be. But I remember thinking, wow, the good stuff in this is really, really good. So it's kind of elevated between the middle tiers to B. And I'm gonna get so much hate for putting these on the same tier, but deal with it. Superman Doomsday, released in 2007. This is the Death of Superman storyline, and there is just nothing standoutish about it. And that is kind of a crime in and of itself, that the Death of Superman, a movie based on Death of Superman, is very, very meh. So they do Death of Superman, and then they kind of do their own somewhat original resurrection arc of him, where instead of Reign of the Supermen, which is from the comics and sees a bunch of pretenders and follows their storylines, kind of while the whole resurrection is happening. Instead, they do a clone that turns kind of evil, and Superman comes back, and there's a Superman versus Superman. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad, since it's one movie, I'm glad they didn't try to cram in that whole original storyline. For those purposes, a simple good Superman versus misguided Superman is better. So in this one, they have Lex be responsible for releasing Doomsday. They really want to have Lex be a huge part of this, kind of as a through villain for both halves of the movie, because he also creates the Superman clone. So once Doomsday shows up, he and Superman defeat each other, seemingly kill each other. Then Lex creates the clone, and has control over him, but the Superman clone develops his own sense of morality, but it's a judge, jury, executioner morality, especially after he sees some of the worst things, like Toyman, who's played by John DiMaggio, actually, kills a child, and he's like, okay, so I'm going to kill you. Blah. Superman, played by Adam Baldwin, would not be up there, not especially great as Superman. Anne Heche plays Lois. It's a really blasé Lois. It's really bad. She would be towards the bottom. Superman's cheekbones are overkill. They make Justice Leagues look like nothing. And I haven't talked too much about Justice League. But yeah, this is on a whole other level. There's so much more shadow in there. Yeah. So there's some of the one standout thing though is that because Lex obviously loses control of the clone, and he starts to try to do like things that he would do against Superman. He goes in. He taunts the clone, "Come and get me." Goes into a lead-lined room and has red sunlight lamps and kryptonite gauntlets, and he's like, "Come and get me." And the clone just grabs the room out of the building and throws it, and just throws it down because it's lead. Yeah. It's like, Lex. Yeah, he can't see what's going to be in that room because of the lead, but he's also not going to be affected if he doesn't go in the room. So that was pretty funny. That was pretty funny. And there's a through line of Lois finding out Clark is Superman, but it doesn't grab me. Yeah, it's not very good. No, it's all right. The movie's all right. It's not bad, but especially if only because of the type of story that it is adapting. But there's nothing extraordinary about it. So it's middle and middle, so that'll be a C. It's Superman, Batman, Apocalypse. So this is the movie that I was talking about in the very first video as the one that I did include that has shared billing. And the reason that I did that is that it's all, even though Batman is there, it's all Superman's world. Every single thing in this movie has something to do with Superman's world. Darkseid is obviously the villain. There are like fake Doomsday that comes in. Supergirl are maybe arguably the main character of the movie. And then even when Batman does like cool things, it's in regard to Apocalypse, either being on Apocalypse, being with Darkseid. It's a Superman freaking movie, and he's in the title, so I had to put it in. So they brought a bunch of animated series voices to here. You always say Kevin Conroy as Batman, Tim Daly as Superman, Susan Eisenberg as Wonder Woman from Justice League, and then Ed Asner as Granny Goodness, which I think is he was there, and then Summer Glau as Kara. There's a Darkseid, but it's not Michael Ironside. They have Andre Brower, and he's just as good as Michael Ironside. At least he's really freaking good voice for Darkseid. I have a big soft spot for Michael Ironside, and he is quality. But if I'm trying to be objective, Andre Brower might beat him. But that's neither here nor there. It's just a very good voice. So synopsis. So Kara comes to Earth, and they find her naked and babbling in Kryptonia, and she's just like total baseline blank slate. And Superman starts to train her, and then Wonder Woman blows in and is like, no, she's a super lady, she's a strong super lady, and so she needs to come to Themyscira, which is really like, that is so presumptuous. Like, I don't get, okay, and Batman's like, she's right. And it's because he's a simp. Maybe, I don't know. But and then Superman's like, Jesus, fine, okay. It's not like you're taking her away forever. But that is what essentially does happen, because while on the island, Darkseid kind of ambushes her and takes her to Apocalypse, and then Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Big Barda all have to go to Apocalypse to save her. It's a fun movie, but it's also pretty standard fare. But the final fight is definitely worth a mention. So Darkseid brainwashes Kara, and she gets saved, and they get back from Apocalypse. And then Clark and Kara are going to visit the Kents, and Darkseid just punches out of the front door. The Kents aren't home, and he's like, "Boom! I'm here. Here's Johnny. Here's Darky." It comes out of absolutely nowhere. Like, they did a really good job at, they had a bit of quiet and no music, so you kind of, if you were thinking about it, but they were so, you're like, oh, this is the denouement, right? And the kind of the battle had already happened with Batman and Darkseid and Superman and Supergirl, so yeah, but no, it took me off guard, at least. And then most of the fight, like, Darkseid blitzes Clark and like punches him into space, and most of the fight is between Kara and Darkseid, and the choreography of this fight is fantastic. There's this one scene where he's shooting his Omega beams at her, and she's trying to avoid them, and obviously they're following her, and then she flies up behind him but like kind of skids and puts her back to his. And then she digs her feet into the back of his knees and reaches back and grabs his chin and just flips him in front of her to catch the Omega beams. And that is so freaking cool. Now, with that said, these Omega beams are inconsistent as always. Remember when they meant instant ashes? Like with Dan Turpin, and even in the comics, it's turned like Supergirl to ashes. I remember that. It's a bit confusing and annoying sometimes, but regardless. Yeah, the fight and the rest of this being entertaining enough, I would say makes this a C, but it's higher than Doomsday, I would say. It's entertaining. All-Star Superman is based on the Grant Morrison comic of the same name. So Superman is dying from overabsorption of sunlight, which is somewhat ironic, and the response from Superman and the whole story to this is hard to describe. It's mythological, optimistic. I don't know how to get more precise than that, and it bugs me. They really lean into his mastery of Kryptonian and otherwise alien technology that, you know, you'd think that would be present in his later life. So the movie deals with, it's not just the alien aspect of Superman, but the cosmic aspect in a way that nothing else here really does. We see him act not only as a caretaker of Earth and its people, but of anyone and anything that crosses his path. It might be Kryptonian astronauts that are initially evil once they get powers, but then he helps them, you know, find a different way once they get sick. He still has the bottle city of Kandor, and he finally commits to going off into space to find a planet where they can start a new life. And with that in particular, going from general to specific for a moment here, I think that represents his choice to be a purveyor of self-determination instead of keeping the bottle like, you know, Brainiac would. It's because he's always had to balance being a caretaker with being an inspiration, and that's a sign that he has, you know, he's trying to, as a caretaker, bring things to their conclusion given that he's going to be gone, but then also realize that he's not going to be here to take care, so you have to let people take care of themselves. So yeah, I'm going to be a bit all over the place while talking about greater themes because the movie is not like super linear in terms of plot. Like, for example, there's this whole thing where Lois, instead of having freaking tension about learning his secret, he tells her his secret, and he's like, okay, I am going to make up for lost time here. I'm going to give you a day of that's unforgettable in my world, including giving you your own powers. And so that's an element of things. There are some other, you know, again, it's the name of the game is mythology here. So he does a bunch of feats that are going to be remembered in time. He answers the unanswerable question from the cosmic sphinx. He arm wrestles Samson and Atlas for Lois's love. He did the Kryptonian thing, and then and then Solaris, the fake sun, attacks Earth, and he defeats him. it's just this kind of whole larger than life thing. But I would say the main conflict is with Lex. And Lex is played by Anthony LaPaglia, who does a great job. Superman is played by James Denton, who also does really well. Everyone does well. Ed Asner and John DiMaggio are both come back, but they're completely different people. Ed Asner plays Perry, and instead of Granny Goodness, and John DiMaggio instead of Toyman plays Samson. So that's kind of cool. And Steve Bloom plays Atlas, for a bit of trivia there. But going back to Luthor, he actually gets a legitimate and unadulterated positive arc in this. We see him at the beginning of the movie where Clark Kent's doing an interview with him, and Luthor's just talking all about how he's working out, lifting weights, and he's like he explicitly talks about some of the things that I mentioned in Superman the Animated Series that weren't explicit, about making sure to remain sharp and strong as a human species and keep up their self-determination in light of Superman being there to always catch them if they fall, So, and there's a great line that he says to Clark of like, I've always liked you. You're humble, self-effacing. In other words, you're everything that he's not, which is kind of the idea, right? That's the idea. But the real conflict starts when he's going to get the death penalty for having done the stuff with the sun that created the circumstances for Superman to get the poisoning that he did. But he escapes by sneaking the same serum into his last meal that Lois got. So he gets Superman's powers. And this is at the same time that Superman is starting to deteriorate. Deteriorate, essentially. But the thing is, the serum also gives him Superman's perspective. And I have to share this quote with you.
Are you okay?
Better than okay. I can see the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And those must be atoms. Little clouds of possibility. Einstein couldn't connect the gravitational force to the other three. But if he could have seen this, it's so obvious.
Uncle Lex?
The fundamental forces are yoked by consciousness. Everything's connected. Every one. And this is how he sees things all the time. Every day.
I don't know if I
Yeah. So, and the one thing about that scene is that it does happen a little abruptly. Like, he's already throwing down Superman and being like, I'm gonna move into the White House later. And then suddenly he's just like, next time we see him, he's just like, so. But regardless, it does seem to be a legitimate transformation. Because later, when Superman outsmarts him and takes away his powers, he is back in jail and he accepts his death and even gives science the means to recreate Superman. Like, if he's not going to live to save the world with this new perspective, he'll make sure there's someone who can. Right? And so, yeah, the end of the movie, aside from that, also sees Superman having gone into the sun because it had been damaged because of what had happened with Solaris and potentially even what Lex had done at the beginning of the movie. And so he had gone into the sun, and you might be compelled to ask whether he's still alive in there. And I don't think answering that question is really the point. Because with mythology, figures are dead and alive at the same time. You know, and the way that Lois describes it, he's cemented his place there. You know, she says he's fixing the sun and he will be back. That is mythological, almost religious in overtone. And we even see this image of him like working a forge to fix the sun. And you might think that that's far-fetched, but yeah, we've seen him use technology to do similar crazy things just in this movie, so it's really not that much. So, yeah, there was this IGN review that says there are too many threads, too many characters, and too many detours down paths that don't amount to much in the end. And again, that is not what this movie's about. It's not about, you know, beginning, middle, and end. This is how something arises and then gets resolved. This is an exploration of a godlike but also very human-like figure who is faced with death and you know, does things to various things to cope with that. It's kind of it's almost a slice of a very, very extraordinary life. You know, so I don't give much credence to that point of view. So yeah, this was, I originally had this as kind of a really like good animated movie. I had it at A, but once I thought about it and was like, you know, thematically it is just perfect, and there's a lot of depth here. It is S level good, yeah. Because like the only thing is that I find the animation style a bit weird, but not much. It's no Flashpoint. Superman versus the Elite is also based off a comic, an individual comic called What Is So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. So they did decide to go with a more punchy title for the movie, I suppose. But this is a movie that deals with Superman and his reputation and the place of his morality in our current world. So the whole thing is about the Elite. Well, the Elite is the new superhero team on the block that is initially allied with Superman in stopping evildoers, but they slowly reveal themselves to be more inclined to enact more permanent solutions to these evildoers, and that they freaking kill them, you know, when they've shown themselves in their minds to be irredeemable, right? So it's another judge, jury, and executioner storyline, and then Superman. So Superman has to deal with that. This stars George Newbern as Superman, which is his first appearance on the list. He was also in Justice League, and Justice League made him my favorite Superman, even though I haven't really been able to talk about him yet. He has this edge to him as a voice actor, and it carries over into this movie because edge is needed for the movie in a way that you will see, and whether that's why he was cast or not, it certainly works out. Polly Perrette is Lois. Actually, a really nice design on Lois there. David Kaufman is Jimmy. Robin Atkin Downes as Manchester Black, the leader of the Elite. He also played Solaris in the last movie. And Gray Griffin plays young Manchester, who was also Lois in God knows how many side projects. She isn't in any of the ones that we're seeing here, but none of them, like, I didn't include any of them because they were not Superman centered enough, or just, yeah, especially that. But it is incredible how many times that she has really played her. But yeah, and so that is the point of the movie. It is spoilers from this point on because it's definitely like there's a plot twist. You gotta be careful. Okay. This is such an important one in terms of Superman's reputation. See, if you're a Superman fan like me, come here. So, listen, there's probably a part of you that's embarrassed. Oh, he's not a cool superhero. Oh, he's naive. Like, the plot of this movie thrusts him right into those conversations and doesn't shy away from them. And it gives him an excellent opportunity to flex. Because we think that he's bloodlusted after fighting with the elite. But he's not. He never was. He just wanted to display what the people were asking for when it was coming from the real biggest kid on the block. So as soon as he allows himself, he's like, all right, let's turn this up. Like, it's so stern dad. Any pride aside, he's just saying, this is what you're asking for. This is what happens when the biggest kid on the block starts taking care of problems. This is what happens when someone steps across that fine line from public service to unilaterally deciding what's best for everyone. Right? And once he reveals that even though it appears that he's been just killing the elite one by one, that he isn't really doing that he just dispatched them and got rid of their powers, and he made it look like he was doing that. Once the relief of that revelation sets in for the people of Earth, he drives it home by reminding them that, by contrast, he's the one who believes that we all can be better. We don't have to respond with fear or accept that this is just the way things will always be, that we will always have to play by the rules of the evildoers in this world, and we can imagine a world that is better, and we can just live up to this example. And yeah, I mean, there is nothing wrong with this movie. So by that metric alone, it should go in A. But the S means that you are just you just bring something that absolutely extraordinary to the table. This is a good message. It's God damn. I don't know why, really. This is something that I would absolutely welcome being challenged on, but I can't put it even with All-Star Superman. Maybe that's why. They came out a year apart. They're both animated movies, easy enough to compare them. And yeah, there just has to be something separating the two in my mind. So I just realized that Unbound came out first, so we are going to talk about that next. Superman Unbound, animated movie, year later, from Superman versus the Elite, starring Matt Bomer as Superman, Stana Katic as Lois Lane, Molly Quinn as Supergirl, and John Noble as Brainiac. So yeah, this is the best depiction of Brainiac so far. Technically, I mean, I'll say right now, this is miles better than Brainiac Attacks, even though it is another Superman versus Brainiac movie. But in contrast, since that was somewhat in keeping with Superman the Animated Series, you had a Kryptonian origin for Brainiac in that. Here, he's back to being a Coluan, which is his original thing. And that's presumably because we've exhausted the Kryptonian heritage storyline, maybe? His origin here is in terms of the planet Kolu, he's a Spider-Man villain. Because he's a scientist who gave himself enhancements. The paradox of Brainiac's directive which is that he's charged with gathering all knowledge when knowledge is always developing, is explicit in this movie to a degree we haven't seen in movies and TV. So that in that way, his thematic representation is put in the forefront, which is good. But there's also not a heck of a lot else to the movie that, like, there's something with Supergirl. She has trauma from the shrinking of Kandor, where she lived, and that offers some depth to the movie, but this problem doesn't do much other than exist. And something to be uncovered, about like halfway into the movie when Lois, I think it's Lois who figures it out, or maybe Superman, I don't know. They don't do anything interesting with it. She's just dealing with that. She just kind of has to overcome fear, which is, it's not nothing, but it's a bit pedestrian, honestly. And there's some tiresome pressure from Lois to make her and Clark's relationship public, but it literally has no relevance to the rest of the story. This is something that is gonna start to happen. You have Clark and Lois, where it's just like, oh, we're gonna have a thing. We're just gonna throw something to do with romance in here because it has to be in here, even though it could be without it easily, and there would be no problem. And so, in regards to Brainiac, I will say that the way he's defeated by, his armor is like, because again, he's someone with enhancements. He's not like cybernetic and completely decentralized like he is in animated series. His armor is stripped and he's beaten by a bunch of maggots in a swamp, because they're fighting in a swamp. So he's beaten by the uncontrolled chaos of life, which he has tried to put into boxes and bottles. And that's pretty damn poetic and creative, I will say. So, yeah, best thematic depiction of Brainiac, kind of extraordinary in that way, and a couple of other things going for it makes it a C for me. Man of Steel. I get the feeling this is anticipated. This has been anticipated. So let me give my background to this. When I saw this movie in theaters, I was pretty taken by it, thinking that it was pretty good. And when I initially saw some online reviewers that I was following at the time really tear into it, I got upset, because I'm like, you're being so mean. You're being so mean to this movie. And then as time went by, my opinion went down and down and down and down once I got over the spectacle of it. But I think that along with getting over the spectacle of it, I also did come to forget some of the stuff that I still do like when I think about it, right? So, and most of you know the cast list: Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, Lawrence Fishburne, Michael Shannon, Kevin Costner, Diane Lane, as Superman, Lois Lane, Perry, Zod, Pon Ma Kent, respectively. Russell Crowe as Jor-El. And this is another funny thing. Alessandro Giuliani has a random role, and he was Dr. Hamilton in Smallville. But they have a different Dr. Hamilton, Richard Schiff, in this movie, who looks a little bit more like Dr. Hamilton typically looks, particularly in the animated universe. But yeah, so there's your cast list. The problem with everyone's personality is that it's muted. I am here trying to tell you that the dynamic and kind of the almost over-the-top performances in, say, George Reeves' adaptation or interpretation, it can be a good thing. It can really build up these characters and enhance their interactions with one another. Whereas by contrast, these characters don't stand out very well from one another. So, just to go into a bit of detail, Henry Cavill, the most important one. My friends and I have joked that he doesn't smile, and a lot of people say the issue is that he doesn't smile. It's not. I mean, Superman doesn't smile much in Justice League Unlimited either, because he's dealing with more kind of darker storylines, and he's angry a lot of the time. And that's my favorite Superman. So that's not the issue. No, the issue is that he's not an active character. There is no earnestness to him. If you do not have earnestness in Superman, you're done. You're done. You're almost completely, unredeemable. The sad thing is, alternate / subsequent performances by Cavill would prove that he has the potential as an actor and just how he carries himself to be the best Superman. Like things with some moments in Joss Whedon's Justice League and like a couple of other cameos in the universe. But that didn't happen in a movie of his own. And we have to judge the performance as it is. And as it is, it ain't it. It really ain't it. That he's actually, I would say, the worst. When you take Superman and Clark Kent together, he is the worst. If you were to ask me the best Superman, the worst Superman, or the worst Clark Kent, he isn't either of those. But as a whole being, he does not have, neither one redeems him. Yeah, it's not good. Amy Adams, not exactly the cutting reporter we've come to expect. She's just, I don't know what she's doing in this role. She's bland. She's very, very bland. And she's either like, just kind of robotically explaining things in articles that are read to us in a voiceover. And yeah, there's just not a personality. Same thing with Lawrence Fishburne. Where is Perry's energy? Far, far, far cry from John Hamilton, I will say that. Kevin Costner. This performance is a mockery of the uncertain vulnerability from John Schneider. You aren't supposed to complicate the Kents to the point that their innate goodness becomes invisible. His suggestion in the movie that maybe Clark's secret should come at the cost of lives is an insult to the character. That makes me mad. Now, as far as, so that was the peak of my dissatisfaction with the characters. Let me just start to go back in the other direction a bit. Russell Crowe, often put in the same boat as Kevin Costner as far as like acting and depiction of character, but that he is not as much of an issue because he's playing Jor-El. He's playing a Kryptonian man, a Kryptonian dad. He embodies him fairly well, actually. Especially when you consider that most of the movie has him as an AI. Like he is, I actually do think he's really well cast in this role. And it took me a while to parse that from some of the other issues that I had with the movie and how I don't like the tone that he's taking when it comes to so many other characters. But with him, it works. And then especially Michael Shannon. This is the one role, maybe one and a half when you think of Russell Crowe, where I think the restraint that all of these actors are under works. Because we're coming from Terrence Stamp. Kneel before Zod. His crazy needed a little dialing down. Especially when you were trying to make a semi-serious Superman. Now, look. This is the best live-action movie on the list. Okay, that's what I'm saying. And since this is the only other one left, it's safe to say that this is my favorite live-action. But Zod is not something that I really mentioned when I talked about how good it was, because he's kind of a cartoonish obstacle in this movie, in that movie. So in this movie, they decided to do something different. Shannon does have his over-the-top moments, but I think people forget that's a small part of his screen time. I actually think this may be the most nuanced Zod we've ever gotten, with maybe one main contender. But he comes across as a man burdened by purpose. And I think that it worked. The more that I think about it, the more that I think it works really, really well. So, yeah, I just have to go back to Superman to kind of to end it. People are going to point out that this is the beginning of Superman's career. Defenders of him point out that this is at the very beginning, and some searching for purpose, as you see in the movie, is bound to happen. And that's true, but there has to be a seed of what he'll become. Some unrefined rawness of desire to serve, of goodness. But he has too many questions and not enough fundamentals in this movie. He's a blank slate. It's all nurture. And I don't like that. I don't like that. It's in contrast to the thing I mentioned in Superboy, where even when he loses all of his memories, that innate need to help comes back up. That is how it should be. You have to have the earnestness before you go into all this thinking and cynicism. It has to be there as kind of an undercurrent, as a way out, if you're going to enter that in. So, yeah, not good. Not good. But can I justify putting it on the level of Kirk Alyn and Superman 3, Supergirl? I don't think so. No. They are trying to go a mature direction and be more mature overall, even though it comes out really try hard. So I think I'm going to settle on C here. It was not the big comic book glut era boost that Superman needed. But it's halfway decent.